What is up, everybody? Joe here for Rad Parenting with my co-host,
Anea Bogue.
And we've got a killer show for you guys. A little bit of business at the beginning of the show. I sent out the book to our winner this week. So I know that you've been wondering where that book is, and it has went to your house. It finally got there, and I know. I blew it because I told everybody last week I sent out the gift, and then I didn't do it in there.
You didn't?
I know, I lied. I didn't lie. I thought it was going out. Yeah, but I came in yesterday to get prepped for this show, and I realized it had not been sent out.
Oh, my gosh.
So there you go. Also want to thank everyone once again for all the great reviews on iTunes. Still can't believe that you guys are doing that. Thank you so much. And keep the emails coming to the show. All you got to do is email us at radparenting@gmail.com. Either Anea or myself will answer those emails.
And keep coming up to me at my hairstylist and yoga and spin.
Yeah, Anea's getting recognized, you guys. The only person getting recognized from a podcast. You got recognized at a yoga class.
It's ridiculous. I don't know how that is because nobody sees my face. Oh, it must be because of the pictures that you post.
Yeah, well, all the pictures
how
from...
else
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I think obviously here in Los Angeles... that's like our biggest listenership right now is Los Angeles. So I'm sure that, someone is, hey, I do yoga. I'm raising my kids. Rad parenting.
Anyway,
it
it's awesome.
Together.
I love that people are listening, and I love that they come up and talk about it and want to talk about it.
It's great. So. It's great. I'll also tell you this too. And this is something that's literally going on this week. My wife had to go away for a doTERRA event, and she's gone for the entire week. So I've been in charge at home. And I got to say, I love it. I love it. I've been doing all the pickups, all the drop-offs, dealing with the lunches and the food making and the where's my hairband and I need my uniform washed.
I am impressed.
Yeah, and I'm crushing it.
Of course you are.
Yeah.
How are you managing?
I treat it like being a tour manager. That's how I treat it. Like my son was, I was like, what do you want for breakfast? And I'm literally making his breakfast or making his lunch and setting up his breakfast the night before. And I've been doing comedy shows. I was at the Laugh Factory.
You're a machine, Joseph.
I don't know about a machine. I just survive on caffeine. Okay. And I have crazy allergies. So if I sneeze during this interview with our guest, don't think that I'm sick. It's just allergies.
Okay, and I want to I want to acknowledge how important it is, and you sort of mentioned this earlier when we were talking about this, it's really critical that I love that your kids are getting to see you in that role. It's that whole idea, there's this T-shirt floating around that's like, dads aren't babysitters, they're parents, right? And so I'm thrilled that you're stepping into your full parent role, which I'm not at all surprised about, and that your kids, your son and your daughter, are both seeing you just kill it.
Yeah, and it's been a blast. At one point, I made dinner for my son and my daughter, and we were sitting at the table, and Nate just looks at me and goes, "Dad, you're kind of crushing it right now," as he's just wedging these mashed potatoes I made, and I was like, "Cool,
well done."
Yeah, it's been great though, and it's definitely, I love the dynamic. But I'll tell you right now, I'll be super stoked when Karen gets home this weekend. Yeah. It'll be like
it's hard being a single parent.
Oh my gosh. For all the single parents out there right now, I salute you. I do, man. I called my mom this weekend and was like, "How did you do it?" She's like, "I smoked and had margaritas the entire time." I'm like, "All right. Love you, Mom." With all of that said, our guest on the show today is a friend of mine. He's a musician, he's an activist, and he's just a great guy. And more importantly, you guys wanted a show about having a toddler. This guy has a 3-year-old. Welcome to the show, Mr. Wayne Kramer. How are you, Wayne?
I'm terrific. Thanks.
Thanks,
Joe.
I gotta thank you for making it over. I know we talked about it a little bit. You've been super busy. We're going to talk about so many different things. But first of all, for the people that are listening that know who Wayne Kramer are, you're like, yes, this is going to be good. For the people that might not know Wayne's background, I just got to throw out MC5. That's all I got to say. Throw that in there. The Clash song, Jail Guitar Doors. Yeah, that song is about this dude that's sitting right in front of us. And also we'll talk about his, basically, the foundation, Jail Guitar Doors, that he started. How many years with Jail Guitar Doors?
8 years.
8 years. And just a great work that these people are doing. So I want to talk about that. But like I said, you guys have hit us up. We get a lot of emails. You're always talking about, teenagers.
Or babies.
Or are you really?
You're just about to have a baby or you've got teenagers. What about the toddlers? Which is a whole, that's when they really... Look, I know from having two. So the early years are tough just because you're like, what does this little thing want? All it does is cry. And then they start having personalities, right? Which is fun. And at the same time, you're like, oh, wow, I'm really dealing with a full-blown human being now. What is going on?
Total agency, total sentient, autonomous human being. They don't know anything, but their identity is already there in place.
Yes.
And for toddlers, for my 3-year-old, he's a boy. His name is Francis Marin Kramer, and he right now is peaking on limit testing. It's all about limit testing.
Give us some examples.
Well, 2 nights ago, he was finishing his bath, and I identified with your crushing it as a father, cooking, cleaning, caregiving, because I do that a lot. I work a lot. My wife works a great deal. And if I'm not scoring a show, I write music for film and TV shows. If I'm not on a show, I go home every day at 3 because our nanny leaves at 3. And I have Francis from 3 till sometimes bedtime. And so he was finishing his bath, and he's got a selection of toys in there. And I said, Francis, put your toys up on the shelf when you're getting out of the bathtub. And he said, no. I said, no, put your toys up, And he said, no, it's okay, Papa. It's okay, no. And I said, well, if you don't put them up, then I have to put them up. And he said, that's okay, you put them up. And I said, son, this isn't fair. Tomorrow morning when I go to take a shower, I've got to clean up all your toys. They're going to be at the bottom of the bathtub, He said, that's okay, Papa. That's okay.
Just
you can
call
put
it like
away.
it is.
I was just going to say, he's been around for 3 years. He's like, yeah, you pick him up.
Yeah, I know what's up. So let's give everybody a little bit of context here, because as if the toddler years are not challenging enough, you decided to have a child. You and your wife decided to have a child much later in life than many of us do it. So let's just talk a little bit about, because I'm fascinated by this idea of... my personal feeling is so many of us have babies in our 20s when we're so fertile that we almost have to just think about getting pregnant. We get pregnant. And, but in our 20s, we don't know who the heck we are.
Right.
And, I had my oldest I had when I was 26, and I had it pretty, I'd finished college. I had my first teaching job, I was, and even then I was like, how do people do it that don't have these things in place? Right. And then my younger daughter I had when I was 38. And the big thing that I've noticed, so I'd love for you to speak to this, is that who I was at 26 and, being a parent for the first time then, and who I was at 38 and more developed myself, just more life experience, more wisdom. I've brought those things to parenting. So let's talk about your choice to have a child later in life, and then also what you think you've been able to bring to the table as an older parent and what the challenges are.
Sure. Well, it wasn't a recent choice. I had baby hunger for a long time, and had dreams of babies and wanted to hold a baby, and and thought I could probably be a good father, a good parent. And I've been trying for a long time. My wife and I have been together 20 years, and we started trying immediately. It was a long road with multiple in vitros, and finally when Francis arrived, it wasn't that we waited. We were trying.
How old are you, Wayne? If you don't mind,
I'm 68.
68.
Yeah, and so I think like. I guess my fundamental approach is that I'm just about done being a child.
That is the best answer I've ever heard.
Maybe I could look after one.
Right.
I mean, I can't claim maturity. I know what it is, and I'd like to think I'm moving in that direction.
Right.
But so what I bring to it is 65 years of experience on the planet, most of which it does me no good. And with toddlers,
You might be surprised.
I'm learning as I go.
Yes.
But yeah, I think there is something to your point that, as we move through our developmental stages and acquire a little wisdom here and there, that we might be better positioned to care for another human being. You're right. When you're 20 years old or even 30 years old, you're still in your establishing yourself.
Yes.
Or even before that, figuring out yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
Era. And then, I guess from our 30s through our 50s, we're establishing ourselves. And in our 50s, we enter into a kind of some level of mastery, at least career-wise or work-wise.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that I'm on Anea's tip in the sense that I had my first child at 33, second one at 36, and although I thought I was prepared and where I was as a man and as a father, it really was almost my ego telling me what it was going to be like to be a dad, what it was going to be like to be a father, and what it meant. And obviously when you listen to your ego, your ego is not your amigo. So for me, it was a lot of, once my son and daughter showed up, I realized it wasn't these. I love all those movies like Field of Dreams and Rocky, and it's all perfect, and we're gonna have the great conversation about sex when the lighting's just right, and I'm in the best mood, or we're gonna have these great conversations about other life stories, and driving to school. I was joking around the other day. I was driving my son to school, and I'm trying to have this. He asked me a question, and I was like, "Wow, here's an opportunity for me to really drop into sharing some knowledge." And he just said straight up, "Dad, doesn't need to be a life moment right now." Just said, I'm like, that's not in the script,
dude.
Yeah, but see,
wow,
what I'm saying in my 30s, I would have I would have got upset with that. I would have been like, hey, you know what? I'm telling you how it is because blah blah blah. And now, 49 staring at 50. I get where he's at. He's 12, and I remember being 12. I didn't want my dad to tell me these great life lessons at 8 a.m. on the way to school on traffic. Like
brevity. It's like good sports writing.
Well, and especially this generation, it's like they want it quicker. They don't want it at all. So you got to dial that in. So what about the because who did we have in here? I think it was Chris Shiflett when he talked about like all of these years of it just being, or maybe. Well,
it was with Chris, and I think also with Dan from OK Go.
And Dan, right? All these years of being about yourself, right? Like,
for musicians, forget it. Yeah, it's all about us all the time.
So, what has that shift, Wayne? How has that been for you to go 65 years? It being about yourself, and I think in a magnified sense when you are a performer, because it's not just like time to myself. It's like, it's all about you on the stage. These people are just like, we love you. And now you share life stage with this other incredible little person.
I've been demoted.
You've been...
Yeah,
your importance has been put in perspective.
I used to be somebody around my house.
Yes.
I was like the man.
And I always say this.
I always say
I'm
this.
Not the
Wayne,
man anymore. No. It's another man.
I always say this, Wayne, is I feel like with my kids, when they were younger, I was the rock star. I'd walk in through the front door, and my daughter would run right up to me and just give me this hug. And I'm sure with Francis, he still gives you this hug.
It's the greatest.
Where I'm at, it's a great feeling. You walk in through the front door, like everyone's so excited to see you. I will give you a snap into the future. Is that now when I walk through the door, I'm not treated like the singer of the band, treated like the roadie. It's just like,
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Yes. And not, get me this. Can I go here? Okay, great to see you. Boom. So, but I'll ask you this. How was it to shift at 65, a lifetime of, I get up when I want. I do this. My wife and I travel. I'm sure that you guys spent, so much time together. You're together 20 years. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, there's 4 o'clock feedings. And
somebody else is dictating what your day-to-day schedule looks like.
You're dealing with a singer, Wayne.
I was ready for it.
Okay.
I couldn't wait to make formula and get up in the middle of the night and change diapers. I mean, I'm down with all of it. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
And, I got a little tired of, being Wayne Kramer.
Yeah, sure.
and you start to think, well, what is, you wonder about the value and meaning and usefulness.
Yeah.
And how do I militantly oppose my own nihilism, my own cynicism?
Yes.
And I knew that my son would probably give me an answer for all that.
Well, and it's interesting, I think, because at the toddler stage, so at 3, to your point where you're like, you start to see his identity. They start communicating with us like little people. So are you seeing already at 3 that there are opportunities for you to share what you've known, where you've been? Are there little, are there already moments you're seeing?
My son at the moment is obsessed with volcanoes, tornadoes, and sharks.
Oh, interesting.
And we have a couple of great shark books, So in one of the books, there's some nurse sharks, and I said, I've been in the ocean with those kinds of sharks. Really, Papa?
Wow.
You saw that kind of shark? Yeah. And jellyfish, yeah. They sting. How do you know? Well, I've been stung by jellyfish. Oh, and then he'll say, Mama, Papa knows this shark. Papa knows this jellyfish. It stung him.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
I feel that the question you asked at the beginning, and Wayne answered it right away. And for a listener out there, that all of us, some people have been on the fence with, maybe I'm too old to have a son or a daughter. Maybe I'm too old to fall into that role of parenting. But it almost feels like for some of us, the older that we are, the more comfortable. Because you just said something I never even thought of. You were pretty tired of being Wayne Kramer, as a entertainer, as a songwriter, as the guy that everyone wants to ask the questions about, and wow, to hear you say, yeah, you know what, I'd already done that, and I'm ready to drop into being a dad. That right there is the real, I think, answer to anyone that's listening. That's like, you know what? Maybe I'm done being, I'm done with this part. I'm ready to drop into being a father.
Right. And I think that it's always valuable to look at the script that we've created, within our society, some of which was dictated, generations ago when people only lived to be, 35 or 40 years old. And now that we have these much longer lives, I think many of us are still following that script. Our biology is still following that script to some degree, where it's much easier, for example, to get pregnant, as I said earlier, in your 20s than it is in your 40s and 50s. So I think that this is going to be different for this next generation. Your son will say, "Oh, well, I was the child of parents who were in their 60s and their 40s, and why I could do that way too. And look how I've turned out." I mean, I think it would be fascinating to do a study on your son. I mean, there's some really extraordinary circumstances given who you are, but even beyond that, just to be like, what is it like to be a child of parents who decide so consciously in such a heartfelt way, like, I'm ready to just not have my life be about me anymore. I really want this to be about somebody else, By the same token, I have to ask you, what are the big challenges that you're experiencing now, dealing with a highly energized, toddler, as a man in your late 60s? What are the challenges of taking that on at this point in your life?
Well, energy level is a challenge. I mean, from the moment he opens his eyes in the morning, it's on.
Yeah.
He's in it's full measures. I mean, he's running, jumping, reading, talking, playing games, and wants me to do everything with him. I think he's starting to realize that, I'll say him, no, you go ahead and you run around and I'll watch.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to cheer you on from on the sidelines.
Yeah, I'm going to sit right here,
Yeah.
But that's kind of a minor thing. I think the challenges are the challenges that most parents face.
With a 3-year-old.
Yeah. It's how to successfully deal with limit testing. And I don't do it perfectly. Me and my wife make mistakes all the time, the guidelines are aspirational.
Yes.
And we're finding that, it's better to be your authentic self. So this story I told you about the bathtub, I was perturbed with him. I was not happy with his responses. And I did have to put his toys away. He got out of the tub without putting his toys up on the shelf. And he knew it. And I didn't say anything else about it. That was it. And then his mother came home, and we were sitting in the bed watching Sesame Street. He gets to watch a little bit of it before bedtime. And he picked his nose, and he rubbed the boogers on the sheets.
As you do when you're 3.
And my wife lost it. Lost it. She went ballistic. She just can't abide that kind of thing. Me, I'm a guy.
You've been on tour.
Yeah. I've done it myself.
Yeah.
But she lost it, and she went off and turned around, and he was so upset he hit her.
Ooh.
Then she really lost it.
Yeah.
So I had to grab him. I grabbed him by his 2 forearms. And as soon as I grabbed him, I realized, you're overreacting, Wayne. And I let him go, and he's weeping and crying, and his mother's upset, and I'm, and I know that when a child is upset or an adult, that you can't talk to them while they're melting down.
Yes.
And we've never told our son, don't cry or stop crying.
Wonderful.
Ever.
Thank you for that.
And so he's crying. And finally, it passes, as it does. And, we had the rest of our night. The next day, I was home alone with Francis. He's taking his bath. And he finishes up, and I hear, Papa, I'm ready to get out. I said, yeah. I put my toys away.
Wow.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
Then we got into bed to watch his show, and he said, could I have a tissue? I have a booger.
Wow.
Now,
yes.
It had to go down the way it did. My wife had to be able to react spontaneously as the person she is. I had to be able to show my disappointment to him. And he stepped up. And I think if you're authentic and conscious about what you're doing, you can't do this stuff on autopilot.
Yes.
You have to. I knew I was upset. I knew it wasn't that big a deal, but I knew I wanted to send a message.
Yeah.
And I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't have to. He clocks everything. Children clock everything that happens in your house.
Yeah.
And he got it. I mean, one day he did something. He threw something in the house, and we kind of have a no throwing rule. And I got out of bed, and he said, "Why are you mad?" And I said, "What did you do 5 minutes ago? Did you throw something?" "Yeah." So I mean, he gets it all. So I think if you're authentic, in an adult kind of way,
yes.
in a parental kind of way, then kids pick up on it, and hopefully, what they see in you is the model. I mean, they're learning how to live in the world by watching how you live in the world.
That's right. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, too, when you talked about the bath example, that your communication to him was, well, that's not fair. Like, we're both here, and if you don't pick up your toys, then I'm going to be left to pick up my toys. And so there's all these opportunities to teach them about, like, yes, you're an individual and you have your thoughts and feelings, which I think is, to your point about being authentic. It's like showing our kids that we're human and also demonstrating that we need to find a way to live together. And to be,
right.
compromising and,
Yeah, I gotta rewind to something that you mentioned that it took me a while to learn, and I think parents learn this every single day, is that in the middle of the heat of the moment, that what you're saying, and when the child's upset and you're upset, that isn't the time to try to hit home what the lesson is or what the repair is. It's that moment that you said. The next day you're having some time with Francis, and then these things happen, and you acknowledge that, he acknowledged it. He's getting the Kleenex. He's putting away the toys. It's funny though, because I think as parents, and we use this word a lot on the show, is there's triggers. Obviously wiping a booger on a sheet is a trigger for your wife. And for me, a trigger, I always talk about it on the show. It was so hard for me when my kids were younger, was like a respect thing, like just blatantly, not listening to me or doing something that I felt like I could feel. And I remember, and you said this, and I was like, wow, Wayne has that already built in, is acknowledging, I'm going to take a second, let this moment happen, and then I'm going to come back and address what happened. Whereas for me, these triggers would happen. I'd be in the moment, and I'd feel my chest getting tighter, and that's when I'd go, oh, this is a trigger for me right now. It's a trigger because so-and-so did A, B, and C. That's something that I have to deal with, and then step away. And I always had such better results, handling.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's also, and I'm spacing on the author's name, but in the Four Agreements, the whole first chapter is really potent, right? He talks all about the domestication of human beings and how, and it would be happening. I mean, it really starts to happen in the toddler years in earnest because we can then actually interact with them. But what are the things that,
You're interacting with them as infants.
Yeah, of course.
They're clocking everything then, too.
I totally agree. But I think it's taken to the next level when they enter like their toddler years, where they really are moving about like co-human beings. Like they have things to say back to you, and you're engaging in it. Exactly. And I think we have to be careful of making sure that we're hearing, like sometimes I think that there's a purity that comes through. Like at 3, your son doesn't have all the layers of domestication. And I think that at any age as a parent, you can look and go, so what is he telling me? What is my child actually teaching me with this sort of pure perspective on something that I might be able to factor into my own perspective of the world and maybe meet him or her halfway, instead of just, well, no, it's going to be my way because this is what we do. And then we have yet another human being that's just completely socialized, and that true authentic self has been so buried under layers and layers of socialization.
I'll tell you where we got a leg up. When Francis was 4 months old, I saw an article in a magazine about a parenting class called RIE.
Mm-hmm.
What was it called?
RIE.
RIE.
Okay.
Resources for Infant Educators.
Okay.
And it just sounded kind of good to me, like philosophically their approach seemed to make a lot of sense. And I found a group here in Los Angeles, and we went to a introduction to it. I liked it, and we signed up, and Francis still goes every Friday. And the fundamental premise of RIE is that we treat children with respect. Mm-hmm. That we give them credit for being autonomous, sentient beings.
With their own agency.
And that things like we learned things like when he was an infant, one day Margaret came home with this pillow thing.
Margaret's your wife.
Yes, that you stick the baby in so the baby can sit up.
Yep.
And they were just talking about it at RIE, like, don't do that. Because the baby's not ready to sit up yet. He's not strong enough. He doesn't have the core strength yet. He doesn't have a sense of balance yet. So if you sit him up, he'll fall over and hurt himself. Mm-hmm. When he's ready to sit up, he'll sit up.
Right.
So when children are ready to walk, they'll walk. And, we never drug him around by his arms, teaching him how to walk.
Sure.
We all learn how to walk all perfectly fine all by ourselves. And so it kind of was this idea that, don't interrupt him. When he's playing, be there, observe what's going on, watch your child. Yeah. And he's learning about how the world works when he's playing. And there's no right way to use the truck, and there's no right way to use the shovel. Whatever he's doing, it's all right with me.
Yeah.
And he's doing experiments, and he's it's biology, and it's physics, and it's math, and it's dynamics, and he's learning everything he needs to know. And like this idea that children have short attention spans, that hasn't been my experience. I've watched him work on something for 40 minutes, 50 minutes. I've watched him problem solve. And today, like as a 3-year-old, he's rambunctious and energetic, but he's not reckless. Like he loves to jump off stuff. But I've seen him a dozen times in the last week get on something and decide that wasn't safe.
Yeah.
He knows his own limits.
Yes.
I've seen him do incredible things where he felt safe doing it, and he was safe.
Right.
So, I credit a lot of this to the RIE teaching that we learned. The classes, they put 6 or 8 kids of the same age in a room with terrific toys that are non-active,
Yeah.
that are just objects.
Yeah.
Because we kind of believe active toys make for inactive kids.
Right. Well, the toy starts to dictate the direction instead of the child dictating
making up a game with it or figuring out something new to do with it. And then we let them rip, and of course they can't hurt each other and they can't hurt themselves. We're all watching out for that. But in general, children figure everything out.
Well,
do you ever feel that you do not have enough time in the day to do what you're supposed to get done? You're going to work, you're maybe trying to hit the gym, but you forgot that, I got to pick so-and-so up from daycare. I got to get my dad over to his doctor's appointment. I wanted to pick up the house before I left. Wow, check it out. How am I going to get everything done? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. Go to care.com. Care.com. Care.com is the world's largest digital marketplace for finding and managing family care. That is right. Family care needs can be unpredictable. You got sick kids. You need someone to stay home. Man, both parents are out there trying to make a living. Your kids get sick. Who's going to stay home? Who's going to miss out on that cash? Now you go to care.com and they'll have someone for you that can look after your kids. Don't stress your life away. Seriously, most working parents worry about their kids every minute of the day. You're more at ease and more focused when you know your kids or your parents or even your pets are well cared for. Best part is this, care.com provides access to a variety of background check options you can purchase to help make sure that you're making the best hiring decision. That's my favorite part right there. They're letting you know there's a million different things for you to check out on the background check options so you know who's going to be there with your kids or with your parents or with your pet taking care of the situation. Care.com. Check it out now. If you go to care.com right now, you ready for this? To save 30% off care.com premium membership, visit care.com/rad parenting when you subscribe, and you're going to get 30% off. Like I said, the world's moving a million miles an hour. You just want to take care of your kids and all the responsibilities. Let care.com help.
The way that I always talk about this is I say that one of our biggest jobs as parents is to create time and space for our children to explore and discover who they are.
Absolutely.
While creating safe guidelines so they don't hurt themselves.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting that with your son, I think what happens is when you try to tamp down a human being's natural inclination to explore, what would it be like to jump off that thing? Mm-hmm. When we try to remove that opportunity or limit that opportunity, then they start to act out and force it in a way that can be unsafe instead of listening to their intuition and trusting, that natural inclination.
I agree with you. And that's been my experience, I mean, he's a pretty wild dude, but he's not reckless.
Yeah.
He doesn't do things that put himself in danger.
With my own son, I would always be a little bit on the, hey, be careful doing that. That was just in my makeup.
I'm the same way.
And I would say that a lot. And I realized if I keep saying that, he's never really going to push himself to find out what those boundaries are. So early on, he took some slams, whether it was going across the monkey bars or even later on with skateboarding. We were both skateboarding together one day. And I'll never forget it. I kept telling him we were on vacation and I go, bro, put your helmet on. Put your helmet on. No, I'm fine. I'm all, dude, put your helmet on, man. He's like, and he couldn't understand the concept. And this is later on. He's like 10 at this point. Couldn't understand the concept of why he had to put a helmet on. I would tell the stories. I would say A, B, and C happened to this skater. And we were on vacation. We're both skating together. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go take a run around the block. All right, cool. I go, grab your helmet. He doesn't grab it. At this point, I'm like, all right, whatever. I hear him wailing like 5 minutes later, and I'm, and as a parent, you're
Oh
like,
my gosh.
that is a,
Panic. I
And
know that cry.
Yeah, I know that cry. And I remember I walked outside, and he had taken a slam and wailed his head on the side, and he was just staring at me, and I knew he had wailed his head so hard because he goes, I feel sick, and I go, well, and it was weird because I just slid into, skateboarding my whole entire life. I'm like, you're probably going to throw up. What do you mean? You probably have a concussion. Really? What's that mean? I'm like, what it means is we're getting in the car right now. I left the skateboard there, put him in. My wife's like, what happened? And we get in the car. We go to the we did the whole thing at the emergency room. And thank God, nothing happened. But I'll tell you this right now, because he took that slam, I've never had to ask him to ever put a helmet on.
There's a lot of information in that fall.
Yeah. And
Yes.
you know what else was great was when the doctor came in and said, hey, the first thing he said to him, hey, why didn't you have your helmet on? He's never even met this guy. And I wanted to slip the doctor like a 20. Like, thank you, man. Thank you, man.
And you know what? The safety examples are really like potent and clear, but I think we can take it a step further and say, in general, we are doing our children a disservice when we want to prevent opportunities for them to fail. And I say it as opportunity because there's so much information in failure, and our inclination is to want to I don't want him or her to be exposed to that. I don't want them to feel disappointment. I don't want them to feel like a failure. Well, in fact, we usually learn so much more when we fail than when we succeed.
Can I tell you right now, you just came up with a whole other show topic, just wrote it down. Because I think so many parents right now are so afraid, and including me and including some of the people listening right now. I want everything to be epic. I want it to be perfect. I want everything to be awesome all the time. And as we all know in this room, it's not like that.
Yeah.
And you can't learn unless you fail.
Yes.
Falling down and getting back up is a great lesson for life.
Yeah.
What? So maybe that's a nice sort of
Segue.
a nice segue to your experience with falling down and getting up. And I take it just from you already having made this conscious decision with your son at 3 about wanting to be authentic. That, of course, is going to mean at some point being authentic about your personal story, Wayne. Of course, we know it has lots of great success, but there have also been bumps. So you want to talk about that.
And for our listeners, can you kind of outline the story?
Sure. I was a teenage leader of a revolutionary rock band from Detroit called the MC5. We were hounded by the FBI and the Justice Department. We had many criminal trials and achieved some recognition around the world. The MC5 broke up, as most bands do, and I went on a downward spiral and fell in with very bad people and started doing very bad things. I hurt people, and I was hurt. I served a federal prison term, and then for 30 years I watched other people just like me going to prison for longer sentences under worse conditions. I had acquired drug addiction and alcoholism. And it took me a long time. I didn't get sober till I was 50. So these subjects, prison, drug abuse, are an ongoing conversation in our house. And I know that they will continue as my son gets older. My greatest fear is that my son would follow in my footsteps and end up in prison. I work in a lot of prisons today. We have a nonprofit called Jail Guitar Doors that provides instruments for prisoner rehabilitation. And one of the first things I ask the guys is, how many fathers do I have in this room?
Wow.
And a lot of hands go up. And we talk about being a father and not being there for your child. What can I do to make sure that my son doesn't follow in my footsteps? And I guess the answer to that is I'm not sure. I know he's going to grow up in a different world than I grew up in, and I hope that makes the difference. At a certain point, he's gonna be responsible for his own life, and he's gonna have to make the right choices. I mean, my fervent hope is that I can impart some some of the reality of life in the world, and maybe he can avoid some of the trauma that I had as a kid, and that resulted in me going through a lot of pain. But there's no guarantee. I know people all over the place that have said the same thing. So, I don't think I'm special or that I have any particular gift or intuition about it. I'm being a good parent is the most important thing in the world to me today. It's something I study diligently. I take action constantly to learn more, and my son kind of reflects back to me if I'm doing a good job or not.
And is there, so I'm thinking about that, and I think all of that is beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing so candidly. What, if you could pinpoint one thing, like if you were to, in a nutshell, I'm sure there are many things about, your personal story, but was there a thing in your own childhood that you think, wow, if I can just do that thing differently, because that was a huge source of my own pain and the catalyst for some of the choices that I made.
Yeah.
Is there something that really stands out to you?
My father was an alcoholic. He was a World War II Marine. He saw action in the South Pacific. He was wounded, and he came back from the war with PTSD. And in
before we were probably calling it PTSD.
Yeah,
Exactly.
My mother called it shell shock. They said your father had shell shock. And
How old are you at this point?
My father?
No, how old
Were
are you
you when
when
he
you're
came
dealing
back?
with the term shell shock, when they're saying, hey, the reason Dad's acting this way? How old are you at that?
Well, our family, they divorced at, I was 6, 7, I think.
Okay.
Because she couldn't tolerate his alcoholism, and that's how he treated his PTSD. So there was no father in the picture. And I was left to my own devices as a boy growing up in Detroit. My mother, single working moms are the heroes of the world. They are the strongest people on earth. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was very angry. My mother convinced me that my dad was a rat for running out on us. And so I was going to beat him up someday.
Sure.
And so I ended up beating a lot of other people up.
Right. Well, and ultimately beating yourself up. And I can't
And
let
mostly beating myself
I can't let
up.
the opportunity pass, because this is something we've talked before about marriages breaking up. But what parents often don't realize is that when your mother was telling your father that he was a rat for leaving, she was also giving commentary on you, because you're part of your father.
And I was going to fix it.
Yeah.
I was going to protect my mom, and I was going to fix it. So I became a boyhood thief. I discovered that I could steal and I could get away with it, and it made me big man on campus. The kids in the neighborhood, I had money, I had candy. I started off stealing from my mother. She was a beautician, and she had a shop in the front of our apartment. And so I saw that $1 bills in her drawer, and so in the middle of the night, I'd go sneak a handful of ones. And she couldn't know how many there were. There were so many, probably had $40
Amazing the
in
things
there.
we think.
And so I think that was the kernel of where I went wrong. This idea of there wasn't a man to model manhood for me. There wasn't a man to show me how a man acts in the world.
Right.
What his values are, who he is. That who I am is the most important thing, not what I say or stuff that I
How
own.
much you have, or
right.
yes.
It's not that. It's what kind of human being am I? What kind of man am I? And that played out as my life. I stole bigger and bigger things, and then it got very bad when my fine career as a rock and roller went sideways. And then as I mentioned, you can continue to do wrong and go to court, and you catch another case and you go to court and they tell you you're not such a bad guy, you haven't really been in trouble. Oh, you've been in trouble a little bit. Well, you've got quite a record here. Finally, we're going to have to do something. And they give you rope
Right.
down at the court.
Yes.
And sooner or later, they've given you enough rope to hang yourself with. And, of course, that's what happened to me.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I think what I took from that in terms of like the first question was what you missed was having a father or a male presence that was going to demonstrate or model
Starts to steal.
being a man of integrity. And so maybe the kernel here is that for you to demonstrate on the day to day what an incredible man of integrity you've become now. And I think the organization you've created also speaks to that. So like a man who's also being in service to the world, which is just so impressive, that the hope would be that your son will see that modeled and not have that.
Well, that's the hope, I mean, I if anything, I could impart to him that, being of service to your fellows it is important, that it generates great benefits not only to other people, but to yourself.
Yes.
And to be, ultimately, I want him to be a global citizen. I want him to participate in the world and do good in the world, contribute something to, this, maybe it's a utopian concept, but, to make the world a better place. Yeah. This is kind of a fundamental concept.
The thing that you said that's so important out of all of that, I was just listening, was you're also aware that at a certain point he's going to have to be responsible for his own life. Yeah. And as much as we can all do and say around our children, there does come that moment where they let go of the side of the pool and here we go.
Yeah.
Are they going to make it to the other side? Are they treading water? What's going to happen?
And we're going to mess it up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
We're going to mess it up.
We talk about that all the time. It's okay.
I'm reserving a therapy for him now.
Right. Just start a fund. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a minute about being your way of being in service to the world and how this incredible organization and work that you're doing in prisons with
Joe Guitar Doors.
Yeah, and how the impact that's having.
Well, we today our instruments are in over 65 American prisons. We have songwriting workshop programs in county jails across the country. We run one here in the Los Angeles County Jail in the Twin Towers downtown, which will start. The fall semester starts Tuesday. What we've discovered is that if we can put instruments in the people that live in jails and prisons' hands and task them with telling their story, write a song to your mom, write a song to your son, write a song to yourself about how you got here. Sometimes we set up these workshops, and the workshops they last about 2 hours. The first hour we divide up into groups. We have professional singer-songwriters who go in and work with the guys, small group of guys. We try to mix everybody up so there's no gang affiliations, there are no race affiliations, there's no class affiliations. It's like, how many guitar players we got, how many drummers we got, how many poets we got.
The music is going to transcend all that.
And it does.
Uh-huh.
We sit down for an hour, we knock the song out. Then we all get back together in a big circle, and we perform the songs for each other. And it's in the performances that the electricity happens, because everybody gets the jokes, and the things that guys talk about in jail and in prison, everybody gets it, and everybody gets a good rap. And there are amazing musicians. I mean, I wish I had written some of the songs that I hear the guys write.
Wow.
They write great stuff. And what happens when they have to commit complex feelings to a piece of paper and then perform it, it changes them. There's a transformative power in that process. And it's the beginning of seeing themselves differently.
Yes.
To start to see themselves as more than a crime, more than a number, more than a bed space.
Yeah.
To see themselves, as an artist, as someone that's contributing something. It's a new identity, different than the jailhouse identity,
Sure.
the prison yard identity. They're the guy who wrote that song.
Right.
Now, oh yeah, dude wrote that song.
Well,
yeah.
I would think that they're also experiencing being whole human beings, given the opportunity to express their feelings. I mean, this is the great disservice, and my work has to date been primarily with girls, but it's now transitioning into the realm of boys as well. And all the research is telling us that we screw up girls in a number of ways, and the way that we screw up boys is by disconnecting them from their emotional selves. Mm-hmm. And when they don't have a healthy outlet that is welcomed by their parents, by their community, like your feelings matter, you are allowed to express something more than anger, then they get to become whole people.
We just launched a program in the California Youth Authority, and they call them camps. Mm-hmm. It's a misnomer. They're prisons for boys. Ah. And the first week I go in and I'll do a talk. I did a talk with this group of boys, and I asked them about how many of them know Bob Marley. Nobody raised their hands. Mm-hmm. How many of you know Chuck Berry? Nobody raised their hand. Yeah. How many know the Beatles? Nobody raised their hand. I said, geez, these kids, all they know is hardcore hip hop, Then the second week came. Turns out they knew all about Bob Marley. They knew about the Beatles, but nobody would raise their hands. Nobody felt safe to raise their hands. Yeah. And my experience has been most of the people in our prisons and most of the kids in our youth authority programs have never had anyone say, wow, that was great what you did. Man, that was fantastic. Man, I love that what you just did.
Yeah.
Nobody ever said that to them.
Yeah.
So to come up with their song and perform it and have their friends clap.
Yes.
This is huge.
Yes.
It's gigantic. And it's my opinion that it's the first step in the hard work of changing for the positive.
Yeah.
It's the first step. I know a man, Coach Griffith, who works in the Chino State Prison. He's worked in the California Department of Corrections as a recreation director for 30 years. He's an old hand. And he said the only thing he's ever seen that helped people change was music and organized sports.
Yeah.
And another fellow told me, as a sheriff's deputy, said, Wayne, education's important. Half the people in California's prisons are illiterate. Mm-hmm. They can't read. Mm-hmm. So education is important. But if I educate a criminal, I've got an educated criminal. He said, so it takes a change of heart, something more fundamental for people to change. And the only thing that can reach that deep is the power of art itself. Mm-hmm. Not only music, dance, writing, poetry, acting, theater. All the arts have this unique power to reveal the secret of how to work, how to stay in one place and finish a task, because that's what you need to do. Not because somebody asked you to do it or told you to do it, but you want to do it. And it's that beginning, it's that first kernel of self-expression in a new, non-confrontational way.
Right.
People know how to express themselves in prison, but it's always negative.
Right. Well, and in terms of tapping into that creative force, because I always think we forget that we have the opportunity to be the authors of our own stories in a much bigger sense, right? Yeah. So when you give people, men and women, boys and girls, the opportunity to tap into that creative element of themselves, all of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, so if I could create this, maybe I could also create this. I can create a different version of myself. I can create a different life. Wow. Okay, so I want to know, because it's so incredible, how can people support this important work that you and your organization are doing?
You can go to our website at jailguitardoors.org. You can learn a great deal about who we are and what we do and where we do it.
How to help.
And you can make a donation.
Wonderful.
Hey, and I got to throw this in there before we split. And I've heard you tell the story before, but I have to let our listeners know Because it's a great story, and as a kid growing up in Santa Cruz, I got that first Clash record, and I'm listening to all the songs. I even told the story about how I used to write the lyrics in this journal this nun used to make us do. You got to write a journal. We're going to know what you're doing. And then my friend said, dude, they never read it. You can write lyrics of songs that you want to learn. So here I am writing down Jail Guitar Doors. This is how let our listeners know how the title of your organization came about.
Well, I served my sentence in the 1970s, from 75 to 78. And while I was in prison, this new music form emerged, punk rock. And when I got home, I heard that there was this band in England called The Clash, and they had written a song about me, which I thought was a great show of solidarity from some brothers across the sea. I didn't know these guys, but apparently they were MC5 fans, and they were a political band, and the MC5 was very political, and so they identified with our message and our struggles. And I went to meet them. They came to Detroit on tour, and Joe and Mick were, just gracious, regular guy, musician to musician. We got along great, and they gave me a copy of the single, and they signed it for me. I wish I still had it. And then I didn't think much more of it. I just thought it was a nice thing and nice gesture, and then fast forward 30 years, and I'm deciding that I've got to do something about over-incarceration in this country. And, the damage being done is incalculable. We're locking up. Today we have 2.3 million people. When I served my sentence, there were 300,000 people in prison in America.
And now it's 2.3
million.
Wow.
Another 10 million on parole or probation, direct state control. It's the greatest failure of social policy in America's domestic history. So I wanted to take a bunch of musicians into a prison to perform a concert. I had Tom Morello, Gilby Clarke, Jerry Cantrell, Perry Farrell and his lovely wife Etty, Don Was, Handsome Dick Manitoba. And
I'm
Billy
from
Bragg.
Manitoba. Somebody has a name Manitoba?
Handsome Dick Manitoba. Yeah, there you go. Still around, too.
So the wonderful British troubadour Billy Bragg was with us. So we're getting ready to go play, and he takes his guitar out, and it says Jill Guitar Doors on his guitar. I said, oh, that's interesting, Bill. What's up with that? And he says, it's an old Clash B-side. You ever heard it? I said, Bill.
As a matter of fact.
The song is about me. And he said, what? What you mean? I said, what are the lyrics? Right. Let me tell you about Wayne and his deals of cocaine. Oh, bloody bull.
You're that Wayne.
Billy Bragg.
I forgot. It is about you.
Wow.
So
That's a killer story.
Yeah.
Okay,
so he started to explain to me he had started this independent initiative in England. A man had written to him who was working in a prison trying to use music as rehabilitation, but he didn't have any guitars, and could Billy find him some guitars? Billy wanted to do something to celebrate Joe Strummer's life's work. This Clash inspired Billy to combine his love of music and his activism together, that it could be done. You could do this. And so he wanted to pay tribute to Joe. Joe had been dead a few years, and he wanted to celebrate it. So he said, well, this is great. I'll name it after that Clash B-side, Joe Guitar Doors, and I'll go around to my rock star friends and squeeze them for money to buy guitars for prisoners. So by the time we left the prison, we were riding on a bus back to we hired a bus to carry all the musicians up from Manhattan. We were at Sing Sing. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's a notorious maximum security facility in New York. And I said, Bill, what you're doing in England is excellent. You're British. That's really good. But, I'm an American. I'm a returned citizen. I'm a musician. I think I should take this on for this country. It seemed like a good fit to me. And he said, good, because I was just going to task you with it. So you're the only one that can do it because you've been inside and you know how the system works.
Wow.
So that day, Billy Bragg, my wife Margaret Kramer, and I founded Joe Guitar Doors USA. And here we are 8 years later. We're just launching songwriting workshops in 4 California state prisons around Los Angeles and in the California Youth Authority. We have workshops in the Twin Towers. We have them in the Cook County Jail in Chicago, in the San Diego County Jail. We have them in Travis County in Texas and still at Sing Sing. And we're just about to start a program at Rikers in New York.
So incredible.
What a great journey.
Yes.
Wayne, I can just, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I can't thank you enough for the work you do with Joe Guitar Doors. And I can't thank you enough for your whole story of from Detroit to being a dad now at 68 years old. And you know what, man, I know people listen to the show, they're like, man, I hope when I'm 68 I got as much energy as this dude, because I know right now there's a 28-year-old out there and a 38-year-old. They're like, damn, I don't know if I'm
This guy's killing
it right now. Seriously. So everyone, a couple of things that we touched on that I just got to go through. I took notes because we know it's a good show, Wayne, when I don't talk a lot. So today was actually a really, really good show. I'm going to throw this out there. 4 Agreements. I read this book, changed my life. Anea brought it up earlier in the show. It's written by Don Miguel Ruiz, Ruiz. If you haven't read that book, I know a lot of listeners have, check out 4 Agreements. Definitely game changer. We talked about rye. I didn't want to interrupt when you were talking about my wife and I with Chessa and Nathan. My wife turned me on to the whole rye, the philosophy. Mm-hmm. It hit home really, really well. We went through a whole thing with my son not being able to walk. He didn't walk until I don't even know how. He would just crawled around. He did the Army commando thing forever. And I remember we took him to a doctor here in Los Angeles, a very, very influential doctor, famous, this guy named Dr. Fleiss, super, super cool guy. And he was a part of the whole rye thing. And he said to us, he said, yeah, he'll walk when he's supposed to. These other doctors were like, he needs surgery. And I just threw out, and I love you, Nate, and I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I was like, his head's super big. And the doctor goes, yeah, he's got a big head. Yeah. He's a really tall.
Slowing him down a little.
Yeah, no. They were just like, could you carry that thing around? I'm like, no. And he, sure enough, he walked when he was supposed to. So check out Rye. That's very, very cool. And then check out jailguitardoors.com.
No, .org.
.org. Yes. Sorry. Jailguitars.org.
No.
Jailguitardoors.org.
Thank you.
Jailguitardoors.org.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I have not had any beers today. With all of that said, there's a lot of events too that Wayne and Margaret are doing and putting together, and you can check out how you can support and where you can check out these great events. Wayne, thank you so much.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed speaking with you both, and thanks for the opportunity to blab on the podcast.
Absolutely. Rad Parenting, Wayne Kramer, check mark right there.
Wow.
That was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's got to go in our top 3. Yeah, really, so good.
And do yourself a favor right now, Clash fans. Fire up Joe Guitar Doors again. And for the people that haven't, you just spend an hour with the guy they wrote the song about. Pretty cool right there. All right, we're going to split. My name is Joe Sib and
Anea Bogue.
And we're out of here.
Late.